Welcome back to Julie's Village. I'm glad you're here. If you're interested in getting more information or you would like to be added to my waiting list to receive coaching or consulting services to help with your individual situation, feel free to send me an email at juliesvillage@gmail.com. Julie's does not have an apostrophe. In a previous episode, I talked about how you can gather information to learn more about what the purpose of behavior is for your child. If they are doing a certain behavior that is unsafe or it's really bothersome or concerning, you can collect that information and find out what the purpose is. Today, I will be talking about what do you do with that information. If you're a parent, I'm just going to talk through the process, but I'll also be giving a little bit more specifics if you are a special education teacher and you are working on filling out a behavior intervention plan. So, the first thing that you do is you look back and you look at all of the information you've gathered and you've looked for those patterns of behavior. And those patterns of behavior will help you to key in on a few things. It will help you to recognize if there are certain things that make the behavior more likely to happen and certain things that make the behavior less likely to happen. You can look for are there people that are involved or certain situations that are triggering it. Are they more likely to happen if a child is hungry or if they are tired? When you can see those situations or those specific details, it can help you to know more how you can kind of frame the environment to help your child to be more successful. So, if you are completing a behavior intervention plan, you would call those certain things that make the behavior more likely to happen a setting event. So, if they are more likely to have situations where the behavior is more likely to happen when they're hungry or tired or they're not feeling well, those are all setting events that you would look at. Um, it might be that you notice that there are specific things that happen um, with certain peers. And so you might decide that there needs to be more supervision when they are with those peers or with certain brothers or sisters. You might notice that there are things that are more likely to happen in the morning than in the afternoon. So you might take a look at what's happening in the morning or what is happening in your afternoon to see are there certain things that they're feeling really anxious about or certain things that they just really don't like doing. And you might pair some of those things that they really don't like with some things that they really do like. Or you might look at those things that if they are feeling really anxious, that can put their threshold a little bit lower, their threshold to be able to tolerate things that they don't like as much or to tolerate feedback. That might tell you that they need a little bit of coaching or a little bit of addressing that anxiety to help them then to be ready to face whatever else is going on. For instance, if you're noticing major behaviors on the way to school, there might be some anxiety around school. So you might want to look at what things you can talk about or address that they're feeling anxious about as they go to school to help that transition from home to school be more pleasant. If you are completing a behavior intervention plan, you would consider those things to and in that teaching portion. What do they need to be taught? And so you might teach some coping skills for things that they are extra anxious about, or you might teach just some mindfulness strategies or things that they can do to help them to be ready for certain parts of their school day. When you look at these patterns and you're looking at how often things are happening and how frequently they're happening and how intense they're getting, that part is really good to have just a plan of attack for each one of those um, each each stage. Last in the episode where we talked about gathering the information, I just encouraged looking at different phases of behavior that you see. So at that point where things are just going fine, you might think, well, are there things that I can do to help keeping it just go fine? Or am I just gonna let it ride? Um, if you're doing a behavior intervention plan, then I would recommend noting these things because it will help you and your staff to be consistent. And you can also share that with other school personnel to help them to handle things consistently. You can look at that next stages or every stage of where they're at with their behavior. You can just those ideas that you jotted down or those things that you noticed that you jotted down. Now, for the behavior intervention plan, you're going to jot down ideas of how you can handle it. So, again, if they're doing great, what are you going to do? What do you want everybody to do? If you're starting to see that agitation and you see what it looks like, how are you going to respond to that agitation? Are they at the point where maybe you're just going to help them to express maybe frustration or um, feeling anxious? Or are they at a point where things need to be removed for them? For instance, if there are certain peers that you notice that they have trouble with, at that point of agitation, are you going to help them to just know what words to say to that peer? Or are you going to encourage them to go do different things? Then, same thing with that next piece when they like that agitation is increasing and that frustration or the anger or whatever it is, what does it look like? How are you going to respond? So, for instance, if they start yelling at that point, what is going to be the way that you respond to the yelling? Are you just going to let them get it out? Sometimes I've seen it or even experienced like sometimes they just need to know it's not effective when they scream. So I have even seen people just put in some headphones. Um, but that sometimes that just escalates it more. So if that's the case, that would not be the right response for your child. But it might be the right response to just create more space. If you start yelling, I'm going to go in the other room, let me know when you're ready to talk to me. Or walking to a different workspace. Whatever it is that would be effective and helpful for your child. Then that next piece is that like they are in just full-blown meltdown mode, whatever that looks like for the child. Again, writing down those characteristics and then writing down the response. So, for instance, if at this point things start flying in the air, they start throwing things, you might consider just assessing the area and seeing what things you can safely get out of the way. What things are okay for them to throw. Maybe those you just kind of get closer to them so that they get their attention first. Um, and then that next phase, as they start to just relax a little bit more, maybe that anger is burned out a little bit. What does that look like for them? Does the voice come down? Um, that might be a time to say something that you're redirecting their attention again at that point, like, hey, do you need a glass of water? Do you need to go for a walk with me? Whatever it looks like again for your child that would be helpful or effective. And then that last piece of just now they're completely calmed down. What does that look like for them and what are you going to do? Is that a good time to talk about what happened? Do they need more time before you talk? Do you just need to do just a simple activity to help them calm down even more? Do they like to color? Would that be a good option for them? So there's just some ideas of what you can do, but this Planning is as unique and as individual as children are unique and individual. There are no two plans that look the same, but that process can look the same of I've noted what it looks like at each of those stages. And now I'm going to write down how we're going to respond and share that and talk with other people about what might be a good option there. So within a school team, you'd want to talk it out with maybe principals, counselors, absolutely sharing it with parents and getting feedback from parents. When you present it to parents, I would definitely present it as a draft form so that that feedback can happen and that everybody can talk and make sure that everyone is comfortable with the plan and make sure that there aren't other things that should be considered. That piece where you determined the function of the behavior or the purpose of the behavior is really important for making sure that your consequences align with whatever the function is. So if the function of the behavior, for instance, is that they really just don't want to do math, whether that's math at school or math homework, then you would want to make sure that when that behavior happens, it's not effective for what they're trying to do. So it might delay the math, it might change the way that the math is presented or how much that they're doing at a time. And you would want to think through those things, especially when you're looking at the prevention piece. The best response to a behavior actually is to prevent a behavior. So analyzing that piece, well, is there something specific we see about math that they don't like? Is it frustrating to them? Is it boring to them? Thinking through some of those things can help you to know, okay, well, is there a different way that we can present it? Do they need more challenging math to do either at school or as homework? Or again, does it need to be presented in a different way? Do they need to do more of like a project-based math versus just solving math problems? Um, do they need to do a shorter assignment that just shows mastery versus doing an entire page of problems? Or does it need to be presented just one problem at a time? Do they love using whiteboards or chalk or doing it with finger paint or whatever it is? Just thinking through all of those things um, about what can help them will help to again just prevent the behavior. And again, just making sure that anything that is happening after the behavior isn't reinforcing the behavior will really help you as you look at any information that you've gathered. I can't remember if I shared this story last time, but one big thing that comes to mind for me is that when as a child, again, I think I did share this story, but I think it's helpful to consider that as a child, I really, really didn't like attention. I was very, very shy. And oftentimes, just something that teachers would do would be to say, I like the way that Susie walked to the carpet, or I like the way that Johnny is sitting with his mouth so quiet. And I just dreaded when teachers would call my name for those things. And so for me, that wasn't very reinforcing. That made me want to think of what can I do? Can I walk a little bit slower? I never wanted to be in trouble, but I really didn't want that attention. So again, something that for many children would be reinforcing wasn't for me, and that is something that we want to be careful with other children to make sure that we aren't inadvertently reinforcing behavior that we don't want to see, and that we aren't inadvertently punishing behavior that we do want to see. So another example of that would be if a child is really being disruptive in class and what they want is to escape from class and they're sent into the hall, then that is reinforcing the behavior. Um, but something that could be done instead is giving them a break card. So when you do complete your work, then you get a break card and you get to go do something that you want to in the hall or in a different part of the classroom. So those are just things to keep in mind as you are um, looking at all of the data that you've collected, all of the information you've collected, or um, any way that you have just collected information. What does that look like? What does the information show? And then just again, this is a draft, a work in progress. Even once the whole team has agreed to it, it is still a work in progress. Or if you have as a family have agreed to some kind of plan for how you're going to respond when you see behaviors come up, it can always change, it can always shift. As you try things, you might learn something new. You might learn that something that you are doing as a consequence is really reinforcing of behaviors you don't want to see, or really punishing to behaviors that you do want to see. So then you just want to switch tracks, just adjust things a little bit, change whatever you need to in the plan. It can change at any time. It can change with a formal meeting. It can change with a phone call home if you are a teacher, and just making sure that parents are on board with what you're doing, making sure your principal's on board with what you're doing. It doesn't always have to be a formal meeting. And again, if you are doing this as a parent or a caregiver, if you're thinking through these things and you're trying to make adjustments to help reduce specific behaviors, you can um, share all of this with your family and get your whole family on board. And again, get input from your entire family. Oftentimes, because we have different experiences and different experiences with the child specifically, every member of the team has different information to bring, or every member of the family has different information to bring that can be so helpful. If you have some good advice for gathering this information and coming up with response plans, I invite you to share that in the comments. If you have further questions, please share those in the comments. If you would like to see specific topics or specific people on this channel in the future, I invite you to leave that in the comments as well. And if this has been helpful to you, I invite you to like and share and subscribe so that this can reach more people. But speaking of subscribers, I wanted to do a shout out to two special subscribers, my nieces, Hannah and Haley. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.